we're gonna go over the entire Campfire dev livestream, and I cover the entire details, all of the breakdown from the entire livestream, every question asked pretty much, and all the details within that, as well as things they kind of glossed over and didn't really cover. We'll talk about that as well, but let's just get right into it. What's up, World Streamer? Back in the video, and we're checking out all things Diablo 4. Okay, so first up, the first thing that they actually addressed was increasing the Nightmare Dungeon XP, which thank God, Nightmare Dungeons really do not give a lot of XP. I know a lot of you guys maybe some of you are level 100, or maybe some of you are in the level 70s or even 50s. And yeah, essentially the half level point is around 75 to 80. So if you didn't know that the half level point is around 80, yeah, it's around that point. So if you got to level 80, you've made it about halfway there. And around level 70 and 80, you really want to start farming Nightmare Dungeons, but they are just so useless for XP. And the amount of downtime that it takes to start the Nightmare Dungeon, to run over to the Nightmare Dungeon, start it up, and get everything going, yeah, not very good, so I'm really glad they're buffing it. They're also making it, and this is a controversial one, they're also making it so that you can teleport directly to the dungeon. So they're essentially Diablo 3 rifts from what I hear. However, this does really take away from the open world, and it is kind of disappointing. I wish they would have just overly buffed the Nightmare Dungeon XP, so that way the run kind of made it worth it, because you would get a lot more XP from the Nightmare Dungeon. However, now you're just going to see people constantly TPing in and out, and kind of a lot of instance farming. Not a huge fan of that, because I really do like when the open world is much more alive. Both of those changes should be happening before Season 1, or around mid-July is the ETA for that. Now, the Necros are actually getting buffed, or at least seemingly so. People know that they realize that the Necromancer really needs some mobility. Now, I have heard that Necromancer is really strong for single target, or at least their single target ability does a lot of damage. However, they really need some mobility buff, and they probably need a good amount of AoE, which comes down to my next point, is that Necromancer, the opaque Blight, is actually being fixed, or at least being looked at, because they said the opaque is way too much. Now, we have the big stuff with the Renown resets, the Fog of War, and the Lilith statue resets. So Fog of War won't reset with the season. So forever is from this point on, if you've declared the Fog of War, which is essentially what you see on the map. If you don't know what that is, it's like the little grayed out area that you haven't seen before, or that you haven't gone by. Essentially lets you see the entire map, or sees that location on that specific map, or that specific map point. So yeah, you'll be able to keep that. Now with the Lilith statues, it looks like at first they were going to reset. However, you would have kept your points, but the Lilith statues would reset for the Renown. However, with both the Lilith statue and the Fog of War, you will receive those Renown points when the new season comes. Which brings me on to my next point, which is really sad, is that Renown is still getting technically reset, aside from the Fog of War and the Lilith statues. So you will have to do the entire Renown system all over again. Really hoping they backtrack on that. However, I feel like they're going to make you grind the Renown system, as there just really isn't a lot of end game right now. And yeah, so you kind of have to either grind the Renown, or there's really not much else to do. So I don't see them going back on that. It is kind of nice they've gone back on a few things. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Now, gems will actually be in the material tab for Season 2. So in Season 2, you'll have a material tab for your gems. Basically, gems will no longer go to your inventory. Would have preferred the gems to go to a separate tab and not just be some useless resource, or they're going to be useful, but they're just kind of like in some other side section. Also, being able to drop them and give them to other players. I wonder how they're going to do that, because currently you can't really take from your materials tab. Which brings me on to my next point. They're actually going to increase the resource allocation past that 9,999. And seemingly you're probably going to have a lot of rawhide and the veiled crystals. Those will probably hit max, and I'm pretty close to hitting max on the veiled. That will also happen before Season 1. Now, they did address resist being broken. However, they said they weren't broken, but they definitely are. This has been addressed in multiple videos and documented. And maybe not necessarily broken, but they are a worthless stat, so kind of they are broken. I wouldn't really take anything with resistance. I would avoid that in general. They did say that Season 1 is mostly complete, so we're probably not going to see a ton of changes before Season 1 and into Season 1, as they're already pretty much done. So a lot of this feedback is happening for Season 2 and on. They are finally adding DC logouts with the Scroll of Escape. So essentially, if you get disconnected or your game crashes, you will use a Scroll of Escape, if you have one at least, and this will happen in Season 2. Definitely really good for those hardcore players, being able to DC out and being able to use that Scroll of Escape if they do disconnect. And they are addressing that world boss cash drop. As of right now, if you're on World Tier 4, the cash drops at level 80. and that will be addressed before Season 1 as well. And that seems like it'll even come sooner than mid-July, as it's probably going to be put in a hotfix. They also are going to deploy the fix for the Druids. As of right now, they're receiving Barbarian Uniques, so they're actually going to be addressing that before Season 1. And so they're going to make it so that you don't receive those other uniques from different classes. As of right now, you are supposed to receive other items from other classes, but not with uniques. This is a big controversial one, but it is the scaling in the open world. I know a lot of people, including myself, do not like the scaling, as I level, I feel like I do decrease in power unless I get these big Paragon node jumps, or even leveling my Paragon. It just doesn't feel very good in the open world, especially when you have somebody that's much lower level than you doing a lot more damage because they have either insanely good gear, as when you're level 80, or level 70 rather, you even get the item level 800 gear. And yeah, even as my level 98 right now, or 97, I'm still receiving level 800 gear, and it just doesn't feel like I'm getting the power increase, so the scaling is kind of rough. However, they talked about it for a second, and then they talked about something else with the item scaling. They didn't talk about the level scaling, and yeah, they just kind of glossed over it and didn't really address it. They did say there's going to be more, of course, UI fixes and a bunch of performance fixes. I know a lot of people don't like the UI for it looking kind of like mobile-ish, and I definitely agree there's a lot of useless space that mobile games are kind of known for. I hope they do look at redesigning that in the future, but that's probably going to be way down the line. They did say that there's many buffs happening. There's a lot of classes that are being underpowered, and you probably aren't noticing it until you get to late endgame, which, yeah, a lot of classes seem underpowered for endgame, and some just seem really strong, especially Rogue seems really overpowered for endgame, whereas other classes just aren't scaling quite quickly. Now, they addressed the mob density, but they're not going to buff it at all. That's another big controversial one. They said they're not buffing mob density, but they're just going to increase the Nightmare Dungeon XP. Yeah, that's pretty unfortunate. The way they addressed it, where they said big AoE packs or big mobs give different XP, didn't really understand or like that, because it's just essentially people want the amount of mobs increased. They don't really care if the XP gets dropped per mob, they just want the mob density increased in general. Now, they did also talk on the more customization stuff, because people really did want a lot more customization. They also wanted to be able to change their character in the game after they've already made it. However, they did say that those customizations are locked in, but they will be adding a lot more jewelry and things of that nature in these recent, or at least upcoming patches. They did say that that will change with different seasons. However, you still will not be able to change your player appearance after you've already made your character and all of that stuff. You will be able to change their jewelry, of course, but you won't be able to change their hairstyle or anything like that. Now, there was also stuff addressed with the side quest, and if there's going to be a side quest tracker, they said that there may be a side quest tracker way down the line, but that's something that they're looking at way into the future. And they did address the Renown system again one last time at the very end. However, they did just address that it's going to be reset no matter what, and that those few points, as I discussed earlier, will be allocated to the Renown system. So you'll have that little bit there for the next Renown, so you'll be kind of a little boosted when you first start out. However, you're still going to have to go through the entire Renown system and grind all those quests and dungeons, etc. That should about cover everything and all that was discussed, especially with the timelines and things like that. I think I got most of it right, and I tried to keep track of everything. But if you enjoyed today's video, like and subscribe, and until the next one, deuce.